lost my previous footage, but the idea was that I needed this big old 20 volt impact wrench to remove this nut, which was on there pretty well because you guys missed all my cursing and swearing of tightened nuts that were over torqued, not greased, really annoying. So my objective here, basically, I'm going to pull this hub off if I can, just detach this, turn this sideways, pull the brakes off, turn the hub off to the side with the shock hanging, and pull out my CV joint. Let's do this! Alright, so this is turning into a little how-to, which is fine. Loosen this back up, 17mm. Get them loose. There. 2. Give it a tap. There we go. Pull this out. Okay. So what else do we have holding this on? So can I just turn this and pop this out from the back side? If I can get, there we go, see? See what I did there? Because what's nice about this part here is I can see it. This tie rod is finished, see? That's a good way to diagnose a tie rod. If you can move it easily like that, it's getting loose. Sometimes they stick, but it's more the case that they wear out and get loose. Okay. It doesn't look like I can get this axle shaft out easily. It's close. I can just push. You don't want to damage the seal. Oh, come on. There. The hub wheel bearing has a little play in it, but it's I'd say it's a new wheel bearing is hard to turn, like harder than this. I'd say it's at 80% good. This tie rod is probably 40% good, so it has 40% life left in it. CV joint boot here is starting to crack. So yeah, so I'm going to put a container under this. I'm going to yank the CV joint, the oil is going to come out, and then we just keep going, keep on wrenching. The disadvantage, by the way, of doing it this way is that if I want to take apart my suspension components, it's usually better to leave them where they are because everything's more solid. I won't really be able to go loosen all these off because of all the movement, but I don't really care because I can just reassemble it this way. It'll be good enough for now. As you can see, I put a tire under the car so that as extra safety. Now I'm going to want to move that tire out of the way. Pan under there. Okay, I should be able to maybe I get a pry bar in there. I wonder with a pry bar and pry on it. If not, I'll look on a how-to on the web. I'm gonna watch a YouTube video. Yeah, so YouTube told me I was doing it right. I have to just do a proper yank. This is odd. Okay, that's not happening. I'm trying to like favor the camera positioning to the actual job positioning. Don't want to damage the transmission casing. Got it. Gotcha. There we go. Alright, what else? What else? We've got the ground here to the transmission we can pull off. Alright, just give this a little tap. It's always the same with you, isn't it? Thought we had solved this issue together. There. When something is that hard to loosen, try not to loosen it up all in one go. You might break something. In, out. Probably gonna break this ground, by the way. There we go. There. Okay, that's working. Excellent. That transmission ground is out. I'll leave that bolt on the transmission. I love putting bolts back where I found them. Alright, we're going to remove the clutch slave cylinder here. That looks like 1414. Always check that the two bolts are the same length. Putting bolts back in the transmission, you gotta remember that it might be harder to pull out if it snags anywhere. So, all right, that's disconnected. Move this up out of the way. Anything that's connected to the transmission has to go. All right, now the shift linkage has to go. Can't grab that with my hand. All right, pair of pliers. Transmission's gonna move. Pull that pin out. That pin is out. And put this pin back in where it was. That way I don't lose it. I got it. Pin out. Washer off. Linkage. Easier said than done. There we go. So that linkage is removed. I have a wire here with a connector that's connected to the transmission. I have to get to that connector later. Alright, there was a 12 and a 13 millimeter bolt here to hold the transmission linkage cables. So that is out of the way. I removed this bracket that was attached to the transmission, and this clip was clipped in further below. So I have this harness here that's attached to the transmission, two harnesses. And remove that bolt, get these harnesses off the transmission. There's another harness down here connected to the transmission. Now, some of you might be wondering, why don't I just pop this out and move the harness? Because when I pull out the transmission, I don't want brackets sticking up everywhere and hooking up everywhere. So I want the transmission to be the smallest profile possible when I pull it. So now the transmission mount is getting to be accessible. I want this off, but I've got this hydraulic line for the slave cylinder that's connected to here, so I'm going to pull off this bolt, release this bracket up from the transmission mount, and then I'll be able to access the transmission mount bolts and hopefully pull that out. I also have a side bolt here, which I might have to take the battery tray off for, but I'll figure that out as I go. The issue I have here is I only have like an inch clearance, and if I want to pull this transmission away, unmate it from the engine, I don't think that inch clearance is enough. So I'm kind of thinking that I have to get the cross member taken out from under it and slant this engine down to be able to pull the transmission out. So this is a lot bigger than I expected, but it's okay. See that bolt right there? That battery tray is in the way, so I don't have enough clearance. I'm gonna have to pull the battery out, battery tray out, boom, boom, boom. Now, this, there we go, there we go, beautiful. That piece of crap off. So shoddy. Oh, this is gonna break. It has never been removed. Work it. Slowly. In and out. Yeah, there we go. Broken. Broken bolt. I'm just gonna keep breaking these bolts, by the way. Stay tuned. Only one bolt made it. It's quite alright with me. Alright, now we have access to our transmission. out. Okay, now we're gonna crack the transmission mount bolt. Always go with the shortest socket you can find. It's more of an evenly applied torque. So I'm just gonna, oh, there we go. It's pretty good. It's turning on the other side, so that's good. It's getting a little stiffer because the rust on the end of the threads. Now the fact that this bolt is actually quite loose means that the transmission is not trying to sag down. So that's kind of a good thing, but I have to know what's holding. Because, I mean, there's the engine mounts, but still the transmission could drop a little bit right now. It could be putting pressure downwards on this mount. But it isn't. It's really loose, so I want the transmission to start going down, but it's great to be able to remove a bolt and that it not be like completely stiff because there's forces being applied on the bolt. Oh, that was too easy. Too easy. Question that can come to one's mind is, do I remove this bracket so that when I start pulling the transmission out, it doesn't hit against here? It's always a question of giving yourself enough room. When you've never pulled this specific transmission, you don't know how much room you need. So there is still that sensor down there that I should remove. So I got to remove that, and I don't know why on that line there's a cut wire, but it doesn't really matter. There's 2 wires coming in and 2 wires going out, I think. There is also another bracket right there. It's on the transmission, and it holds a wire harness. So I have to remove those 2 things, and then I think there's nothing else attached to the transmission but the actual transmission bolts. Let's try this. Okay, so I got most of these transmission bolts loose. There's one bolt that actually uses the engine mount. Yeah, I'm gonna have to pull off the cross member underneath to access those bolts from the back side, and that way it'll let the transmission drop down a little bit. So that's where I'm at. Turns out I couldn't get this axle nut off, so I couldn't pull the shaft out of the transmission as far as I would have liked to. So I was hitting up against the subframe over there. Really annoying. So I managed to split the CV joint here, and I had to zip gun this out like crazy because it wasn't like greased when it was put in. So I managed to crack that bearing there, but I think I bent this bracket, the hanger bracket, which is bolted to the block. So I hope the block doesn't crack when I try to remove that and change it or straighten it up. So this is becoming a bit of a nightmare. So that's where I'm at. Transmission's out, and this is what it looks like. You see all those funny little sparkly, well, you know what I mean? Well, that would be the little bit of starter that is bouncing around in there. And it's the same thing for in the transmission. Yeah, it kind of like sandblasted the interior of the bell housing. So anyway, I wanted to go see for sure so I could check my throwout bearing and see the wear on the pressure plate.